A noblewoman with brown hair, pinned up, raised her wine glass, her gaze passing over the crowd. Do you understand now? As a young lady making her debut, you will be the star of society. All eyes will be on you. She lifted a finger to her lips. But there's no need to be too nervous. Several noble ladies whispered among themselves, their eyes full of disdain. All you have to do is take the hand of the dance partner I prepared for you and walk calmly through that door. A man and woman passed through the grand entrance hand in hand. Their dancing was elegant. Now, then, the order of entrance is... The noblewoman opened the list in her hand. Her brows suddenly tightened, her gaze freezing. What? May I Wei? Several ladies in the crowd panicked. Chaos broke out. May I Wei, the eldest daughter of Count Ivy. Holding the list, the noblewoman said, Miss May, please stand here. I intend to introduce you first. May I Wei lowered her head. Yes. Good heavens, the noblewoman murmured in surprise. The rose of the Mater family. Next is May I Wei, that troublemaker from Count Ivy's house. She's 23 and still hasn't debuted. Murmurs spread through the ballroom. Wasn't today supposed to be her younger sister's debut? Two noble girls leaned close and whispered, How ridiculous. She must have followed along because she's jealous of her prettier little sister. So keep your voice down. I can hear you all. May I Wei gritted her teeth, her eyes sharp as blades. We're all in the same position. We're all just supporting characters. We're all unnecessary people. May I Wei clutched at her collar in horror, trembling all over. Damn it, I'm a supporting character. Staring at herself in the mirror, May I Wei was filled with fear. Her own face was reflected back at her. I'm not a supporting character who successfully turned her life around. Nor am I a supporting character who was reborn. A baby with pink hair and golden eyes was held in someone's arms. None of that applies to me. May I Wei folded her hands and fixed her gaze firmly ahead. I'm just a supporting character. I'll be one all my life, and in the future too. A brown-haired woman lifted the hem of her skirt. I'll go on living as a supporting character forever. An absolute supporting character. You must be wondering right now, how a supporting character in a fictional world could know her own place. The answer is simple, because I can see titles. Yes, ever since I was born, I've been able to see the titles floating above people's heads. The male lead's obsession is the point. I raise the male lead like a flower. The final villain is the Duke's daughter. I quit being the heroine's sister. But I didn't know what seeing those things really meant. It was only about a year ago that I understood the truth of this ability. My mentor once said, this is a world where everything is decided from birth. Status and class, wealth and poverty, and the strongest wall of all, the wall between protagonists and supporting characters. Because this is a romantic fantasy world. After realizing that, my entire value system was overturned. If you live kindly, will good fortune come to you? A silver-haired woman handed bread to a man. No, those blessings belong only to the protagonists. If you work hard, will opportunity appear? No, that's just another protagonist's entrance scene. Ballrooms are the territory of protagonists. For a supporting character with no transmigration, no reincarnation, and no cheatability, this place is hell. And besides, I came here for another reason. April approached. Sister, are you all right? April, May I Wei's younger sister, the second daughter of the Ivy family, lightly patted May I Wei's back. Hearing those things must have hurt. May I Wei clenched her fists, but April hugged her. Why did you come here? You shameless thing. You're disgracing the family. April's smile was hidden in the shadow of the embrace. May I Wei pushed her away. What a nasty thing to say. My goodness, so that's what my little sister really thinks. May I Wei lowered her head. I just didn't want to ruin your debut. Her expression darkened. And as for the shameless one, isn't that you? May I Wei's voice turned sharp. You're not April, the second daughter of the Ivy family. You're a possessor named Su-in Kai, inhabiting April's body. April shouted, How dare a mere supporting character speak to me like that? She shoved May I Wei, making her stagger back. Just watch. I'll show you what a protagonist looks like. I'll take everything from you. It sounded grand, but in reality, May I Wei clenched her fists. Is this the limit of a supporting character? April laughed and chatted warmly with a young nobleman, drawing everyone's attention. But I can't back down. May I Wei's eyes sharpened. For that, I prepared Plan B. The clock ticked on, its hands reaching the hour. May I Wei looked up at the great clock. You should be here soon. The door slowly opened with a soft creak. Light streamed in from outside. Petals danced through the air. A figure descended the steps against the light, his cloak swaying behind him. "Oh my!" A noblewoman gasped, covering her mouth. "Isn't that Duke Gaeldake?" another guest whispered. Gaeldake stepped down the stairs. "If you would allow me." Mei Wei lowered her head. Gaeldake bowed. "May I have this dance?" Gaeldake, the northern duke, head of the Rikesian family. Whispers erupted through the crowd. "That duke who never attends balls is here. And he invited someone himself? Who is that woman? She's not even that pretty." Mei Wei looked up at the hand extended before her. A confident smile spread across Mei Wei's face. "Today, I really gave it everything I had." Music began to play. "If I don't have a heroine's halo, then I'll use the glow of a magical item instead." Gaeldake placed a hand at Mei Wei's waist, and the two of them began to dance gracefully. "Good. Everyone's eyes are on me now." Gaeldake's steps were light, and Mei Wei's skirt swirled with them. She turned her head, her gaze passing over his shoulder. April stood in the crowd, burning with rage. "It worked. I became the center of attention." Gaeldake suddenly drew her closer, and Mei Wei bumped into his chest. The dance ended. The two bowed to each other. "Thank you for helping me." Gaeldake's expression remained cold. "It was nothing. My mentor asked me to come." Mei Wei smiled and curtsied. "Then please give my regards to my mentor. I have something urgent to do. I'll excuse myself first." Mei Wei turned around. "Where did he go?" She slipped through the crowd. "That person." Her eyes lit up. "Found him." Mei Wei rushed toward the open terrace doors. "I didn't come here for the debut." She shoved the doors open. She spread her arms. Two men stood to one side. "My mentor once said that in a romantic fantasy world built for the heroine, a supporting character has only one path, becoming the protagonist's enemy." A man said, "I don't know who you're looking for, but they aren't here. Please leave. There are only the two of us here." Mei Wei lifted her skirt. "No, I came here for this exact reason. I traveled a great distance to see you." Mei Wei dropped to her knees. "Please pity me and forgive my rudeness." She bowed her head. "Guardian of the Adonis continent, the only son of the land, the final wisdom of Ilia." Mei Wei looked up, eyes earnest. "Lihim, your majesty, Lihim Ilifton." Both men froze. For a supporting character like me, there's only one way out of this game. Lihim took off his glasses. The corners of his lips lifted. Seduced the male lead. He was Lihim Ilifton, emperor of the Arafulton Empire, the male lead of Su and Kai's story, and the tyrant of this romantic fantasy world. In romance fantasy works, there are three mainstream ways to win over a tyrant. He wakes in a luxurious room. I clearly died already. The first is regression, going back to the past to change fate. The second is reincarnation. Could he be my father in this life? The third is possession. I'm going to live a life different from the original story. And I, Mei Wei, a purebred 23-year-old blonde extra, am none of those three. But that's okay. I have a secret weapon, the so-called three-piece set for winning a romance. Kiss, slap, and Mei Wei's cheeks flushed. "Wait, why is this tyrant so handsome?" Mei Wei took a deep breath. "Get it together, Mei Wei. Now is not the time to get distracted by love at first sight. Right, now's the moment. I have to do them all at once. First, the kiss." Mei Wei lunged at Lihim. She grabbed hold of him. Lihim's gaze sharpened. Mei Wei suddenly stepped back and raised her hand to slap him. Second, the slap. But Lihim caught her wrist in one swift motion. His eyes were icy. "What exactly are you doing right now?" Mei Wei looked at him. Then came the third. Mei Wei lifted a wine bottle high. "Third, leave a mark with blood. Even if I die, he'll never forget me." A knight cried out, "Your Majesty." Lihim dodged Mei Wei. Lihim looked down at the fallen Mei Wei, his expression utterly unmoved. A knight stepped forward. "What should we do?" Lihim said blankly, "Take her away." Blood spread over the ground. Or rather, spilled red wine. Lihim opened his eyes in the bath, water droplets running down his muscles. "There are women everywhere trying to seduce me, and women slapping me. But she was the first to do both." Lihim responded from the bath. "Come in." Gaeldake pushed the door open. "The information you asked for on the Ivy family." Then he saw someone lying on the ground. An assassin? His pupils shrank. A dagger clattered to the floor. Gaeldake dropped to one knee. This was my oversight. Please punish me. Lihim dried his hair. Forget it. Don't concern yourself too much with it. It wasn't something anyone could have predicted. Gaeldake looked up. But Lihim turned and slipped on his robe. What about Mei Aiwei's information? Gaeldake handed over a file. It's here. Lihim accepted it and flipped through the pages. He looked over the file. So clean, it's almost admirable. There isn't a single suspicious detail. Did she plan it this way, expecting to be investigated, or is she truly just an innocent young lady? A faint smile touched Lihim's lips. We'll know once I interrogate her myself. Gaeldake answered at once, yes. Lihim looked off into the distance. Where is that woman now? The dungeon doors slowly creaked open. A rat gnawed at a crust of bread on the floor. Mei Aiwei lay on the cold stone ground. A rat crawled past her. She slowly opened her eyes, and an unfamiliar ceiling came into view. Did I possess the body of a villainess? But then the edge of a sword pressed against her throat. The cold touch snapped her fully awake. Mei Aiwei sat in the cell. Lihim stood outside the bars. The sword pointed straight at her. The moment I opened my eyes, I was about to die. Congratulations, you've reached the death ending. Lihim's voice rang out. Mei Aiwei, you dared to attack the Emperor. Even the attempt alone is enough to sentence you to death. The corner of Lihim's mouth lifted slightly. He tilted Mei Aiwei's chin up with the sword. What are you so afraid of? Yesterday, you looked like someone who didn't fear death at all. Mei Aiwei trembled all over. Of course I'm scared. Do you know how long I practiced for this? But my true nature is that a coward. Lihim looked at her expressionlessly. Yesterday an assassin, today a lady. What am I supposed to do with such a bold young miss? The pressure of the blade bit into Mei Aiwei's skin. I am so scared. What if he really kills me? I'm just an extra. I can't reincarnate. No. Mei, do it like you rehearsed. She clenched her skirt. You can do this. You decided you'd do anything for your only little sister. To save April. Mei Aiwei's eyes sharpened. First, could you lower that first? Her gaze flicked to the blade, pressed at her throat, but her voice stayed calm. Sitting up straight, she asked, Are you certain you want to do this? If you kill me now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Lihim looked at her with interest. You're quite confident. What's your basis? Mei Aiwei looked straight at him. Because I'm a special person. I can accomplish the task your majesty needs most. Lihim tilted his head slightly. The task I need most. He withdrew his sword. But if what you say is boring, I'll kill you on the spot. Mei Aiwei closed her eyes. Pull out the weeds. Sow the seeds. Only a wise woman can uncover the secret of the red stone. Interpreting the will isn't difficult. Gaeldake looked at her in shock. How do you know that the weeds are traitors? The seeds are loyal ministers. The wise woman refers to the Empress, and the red stone symbolizes the Scarlet Rock Knights. The Scarlet Rock Knights can only be inherited by one who removes the traitors, appoints the loyal, and takes a wise spouse. For an emperor whose authority had grown unstable after the late emperor's death, nothing was more urgent. Lihim and Gaeldake exchanged grave looks. I am Mei Aiwei, eldest daughter of the Ivy family. I stake everything my family has, and dare to make a proposal to your majesty. The third move of the romance victory set, and I will place the Scarlet Rock Knights into your majesty's hands. This was far from simply knocking out the male lead with a wine bottle. Mei Aiwei's eyes were unwavering. I ask only one thing. She looked at Lihim. I hope your majesty will. The third move was not leaving a mark, but this. A smile bloomed on Mei Aiwei's face. Accept me as your fiancé. Silence fell outside the cell. Only her words lingered in the air. Lihim stood at the door, staring at her expressionlessly. His blue eyes suddenly narrowed. So, you want to make a deal with me? Mei Aiwei quickly explained. Don't misunderstand. I don't want to become empress. She clasped her hands together and leaned forward. Just for a moment, a very brief moment. Could you lend me that position? Lihim's expression darkened instantly. How absurd. Do you think I would be swayed so easily by the sweet talk of an insignificant young lady like you? Do I look that incompetent and desperate? Mei Aiwei froze under his words, clutching her skirt tightly. Mei Aiwei opened her palm. A ring engraved with a crest lay quietly in it. My father's seal. Gaeldake and Lihim both stared. How was that here? Mei Aiwei looked up at Lihim, who still held the sword. This is the key to my family's estate. Just give me 3 days. If you announce our engagement, then within those 3 days I will eliminate every single traitor. If I fail to keep my promise, you may break off the engagement, confiscate my family's entire fortune, and if necessary, even take my life. I have wagered everything I have. Now all that remains is for your majesty to choose. A resolute fire burned in Mei Wei's eyes. Lihim gazed at her in silence. Then the corner of his lips curved. This is rather interesting. The town square buzzed with voices. Rumors spread through every street and alley. A woman stared at the notice in shock. Is this real? A grand notice posted on the wall announced the engagement of Emperor Lihim Elifton and Mei Wei, eldest daughter of Count Ivy. Two women whispered to each other. Mei Wei, Count Ivy's eldest daughter? Isn't she that ugly, vicious woman? How on earth did they even meet? A man stood with his hands on his hips. The emperor's famous for never showing emotion. There's definitely some kind of deal behind this. Another citizen mused. If he had to marry into the Ivy family, shouldn't he have picked that angelic second daughter of theirs? Mei Wei slammed her fist down on the table. This is a breach of contract. She glared at the man behind the desk. What are you talking about? How can you just put out a notice and call it done? Leaning forward, Mei Wei said, at the very least, there should be half a proper engagement ceremony. Lihim continued reading his papers without even looking up. As I recall, an engagement ceremony was not part of our contract. Mei Wei clicked her tongue, displeased. Crossing her arms, she said, then host a royal banquet instead. It just has to happen within 3 days. Lihim's brow twitched. Human fate really is a strange thing. A person who was supposed to be executed a few days ago is now pointing fingers at me. Lihim folded his arms over his chest. Mei Wei shut her eyes. So mean. Her face fell. Is an engagement ceremony really that hard? Lihim tapped the desk lightly with his knuckles. I can't prepare an engagement ceremony, but if all you want is to attend a ball, I can arrange that. Mei Wei's eyes lit up instantly. Really? Lihim said, I only need to ask my godmother, Marchioness Oligard. Mei Wei frosh. Your godmother? You mean Marchioness Oligard? Lihim nodded. Yes. A gleam flashed in Mei Wei's eyes. She was an old friend of my mother's and also a giant in high society. Lihim tapped his knuckles against the desk. Tonight, Marchioness Oligard is holding a masquerade ball. If you want to go, I can take you. But he leaned forward. There's one condition. Mei Wei held her breath. What condition? Lihim's face drew closer, a teasing smile on his lips. Under the moonlight, the estate blazed with lights as guests arrived one after another. Mei Wei stood among the crowd. A hand pressed her chest. There's so many people. Lihim turned his head and spoke softly. What did I tell you earlier? No matter what happens, keep your mask on and protect your identity. And if someone asks who you are, Mei Wei cupped her face, smiling brightly. A pleasure to meet you. I'm Marchioness Oligard's niece, Lucia March. Mei Wei turned to Lihim. It's a little hard to understand. You deliberately spread the news that I'd be attending the ball tonight, so everyone would come looking for Mei Wei, and by talking with them, I could identify the traitors? She covered her mouth. That's a bit. Lihim gave a faint smile. Don't overthink it. Treat it as a simple test. Mei Wei looked startled. A test. Lihim narrowed his blue eyes. I'll explain the details later. Lihim rested a hand on Mei Wei's waist. Now go inside. Her cheeks turned red. Then what about you, your majesty? Lihim's expression darkened. Do you think I'm asking? Mei Wei ran toward the mansion. Then I'll see you later. Lihim stayed where he was, watching her retreating back. Then he turned toward the bushes. So you're all here, planning to get rid of Mei Wei. Several figures in black robes emerged from the shadows. Lihim's face darkened with displeasure. I thought as much. Even so, it irritates me. To think you dared set your sights on what belongs to me. Murderous intent flared in his eyes as he drew his sword in one swift movement. Blood dripped from a blade and vanished into the dark grass. Your arrogance will cost you your lives. Silence returned to the forest, leaving only scattered bloodstains behind. Inside the ballroom, Mei Wei moved through the crowd, speaking quietly with a masked lady. A long-haired noblewoman bid her farewell. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Miss March. Mei Wei smiled in return. The pleasure was mine, Lady Rosalind. Mei Wei then sat to one side, writing something in a notebook. Rosalind, Marchioness of Oakland. She put down her pen. This is exhausting. Everyone's wearing masks, so I have to track them down one by one. Mei Wei looked at her notebook. But if I just work a little harder? A hand suddenly reached out from behind and snatched her notebook away. Mei Wei spun around in fright. Li Him was holding her notebook, a faint smile on his face with traces of blood still on him. What's this? Were you so absorbed in writing? Mei Wei jumped in shock. You almost scared me to death. Li Him ignored her cry and flipped through the notebook. He turned the pages with contempt. Not long ago, you were worrying about attending a ball. Now you're completely immersed in something this boring. Mei Wei blinked blankly. What? But this is my job. Her eyes turned determined. I've already finished my part. The rest is up to your majesty. Smiling, Mei Wei added, These are the weeds I promised you. The enemies gnawing away at the empire's foundations. This is the list of hidden traitors I promised. Li Him studied the notebook. Are you trying to toy with me? This just looks like a notebook listing the surnames of the ladies attending the ball. Mei Wei pointed to it. Exactly. A man stood in the center of the study, looking up in outrage. What did you just say? His glasses slipped down his nose as his eyes widened in shock. You arrested those nobles without any proof, and your reason was. Li Him's voice trembled with suppressed fury. That they're traitors gnawing at the empire's roots. Yes. Li Him tapped the desk with his fingers, a cold smile curling on his lips. The weeds mentioned in my mother's secret will. The man stiffened. Who would dare say such vicious slander to your majesty? Li Him folded his hands, a cold gleam flashing behind his lenses. Vicious slander? You mean this? Li Him leaned forward. Are you trying to defile my fiancée, the future mother of the empire? The man's face twisted with anger. Among the nobles you arrested, half of them were key figures who helped your mother, the former empress, ascend to the throne. He turned to face Li Him. The late emperor would never have approved of what happened today. Li Him watched him coldly. The atmosphere froze. The man bowed slightly. Then I hope your majesty will think carefully. I shall take my leave. A mocking smile tugged at Li Him's mouth. That may not be so. The man paused at the doorway, his back to the throne. Who exactly is dissatisfied with my rule? My dead mother, or you? The man whipped around. His eyes were filled with horror. Li Him leaned back in his chair, hands folded, his face a picture of total control and ridicule. He sighed lightly. Honestly, he picked up a seal and let it fall onto the desk. It made a crisp sound against the wood. Mei Wei knelt on the floor, gripping her hands tightly. This is my father's seal. Li Him sat behind the desk and lifted his eyes, a strange smile on his face. Tell Mei Wei I wish to see her as soon as possible. Mei Wei tossed and turned in bed, her brows tightly knit, her body curled up. Cold sweat soaked her bangs. 10 years ago, my mother was killed by bandits. The only witness was April, who was only 8 years old at the time. In the crowd stood a little girl with pink hair, alone among adults whose faces were blurred. She clutched a teddy bear tightly, tears in her eyes. Because of the shock of that day, April lost the ability to speak. Mei Wei stood in the corridor and heard stifled sobbing coming from her sister's room. Sobbing in the middle of the night. It was the night of our mother's funeral. Mei Wei peered through the crack in the door. April was kneeling beside the bed, crying so hard she could hardly breathe, her body convulsing violently. Her little hands gripped the bedsheets, the backs of them covered in scratches. Watching April suffocate on her own sobs, Mei Wei made up her mind. I will protect April. All I ever wanted was for April to be happy. I wanted to hear her laugh freely. But then a voice echoed through the darkness. Good girl. April stood in the shadows, the smile on her face eerie and cold. By the time I heard that voice again, she was no longer April. Mei Wei jerked upright in bed, gasping for breath. A blonde maid rushed into the room. You're finally awake. Hurry and get ready. Mei Wei looked bewildered. Get ready for what? The maid grabbed her hand. His Majesty has summoned you. A radiant smile spread across the maid's face. You're finally about to rise in the world. Outside the palace gates, a crowd shouted, Release the innocent nobles. Protesters held up signs. Release them. Release them. Mei Wei faced the window. It's a little noisy outside. thanks to a certain someone who arrested people without evidence. Release them. Mei Wei peeked her head in through the door, sneaking a look into the room. Li Him said nothing, his expression cold and distant. He reached out and grabbed Mei Wei by the wrist. She stumbled straight into his arms. What? What is this? This sudden romantic scene that only appears in romance novels. Li Him bent down and whispered into Mei Wei's ear, "Are you all right?" "Ah, no. I mean those traitors you pointed out. The deeper I investigate, the less I find. That's putting me in a difficult position. I need a reasonable explanation, so I want to know your standard." Mei Wei's eyes widened. What do I do? How am I supposed to explain it? I can't exactly say that I can see their crimes floating above their heads. Li Him looked at the silent Mei Wei. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Mei Wei clasped her hands tightly. "This is my own secret, just like a famous chef would never share her secret recipe." She gestured with both hands in front of her chest. "This is the sort of thing you keep secret, even from family. Besides, the deadline we agreed on is almost here. Please trust me just a little longer." Li Him turned his face aside. "Very well, then I'll wait a few more days." But he braced a hand on the chair and leaned closer. "You remember the terms of our contract, don't you?" Mei Wei stiffened, her smile freezing on her face. "Oh, of course." Mei Wei lifted a teacup and took a sip. "Just wait and see." In a few days, the butler pushed the door open and bowed. "Your Majesty, Miss Emma of the Lindsay family requests an audience." Mei Wei frowned. "Count Lindsay? Wasn't that one of the traitors I just had arrested? Since when did I become someone the whole neighborhood can call on at will?" The butler lowered his head. "My deepest apologies, Your Majesty. Miss Emma is not here to see you. The person she wishes to meet is Miss Mei Wei." Mei Wei looked puzzled. "Me?" Mei Wei excitedly pointed to herself. "She wants to see me?" In the shadows, the butler's lips split into a twisted smile. The villainous of this romantic fantasy world. And those strange words. Sunlight filled the luxurious reception room. A teacup was set down with a crisp sound. The butler's eyes darkened. "I want to see the flaw in this romantic fantasy world." The moment I heard those words, I had a bad feeling. Just as I expected, she's a transmigrator. Emma lifted her teacup. Her expression was calm. "April gave me some advice. She said that if I came to find her sister, all my problems would be solved." That damned sun deity again. Emma raised her cup and got straight to the point. She set it down heavily. "You'd better not interfere." Mei Wei folded her arms and leaned forward. "What do you mean by that?" Emma looked down at her. "Do I need to spell it out? This isn't a stage where an insignificant supporting character like you gets to interfere." Mei Wei was so angry she nearly exploded, grabbing at her hair with both hands. "She actually insulted me right to my face. How could I possibly let that go? You may not know this, but I've had special mental training. Willpower mode activated." Mei Wei calmed herself and lifted her teacup again. "Come to think of it, we haven't properly introduced ourselves, Mississippi. May I ask your name?" Emma smiled brightly, a hand to her chest. "Emma Lindsay. I'm the precious villainess of the Lindsay family, unjustly detained because of your interference." Mei Wei said, "No, that's not what I mean. I mean your real name. Don't tell me you don't remember it." Emma's pupils contracted sharply. Mei Wei shook her head and clicked her tongue. "That won't do. You've only possessed this body recently, and you've already forgotten your original name?" Emma leaned forward. "You're even bolder than I imagined." Emma suddenly stood up, furious. "Are you acting like this because you think you have some special ability?" A sneer rose on her lips. She looked down at Mei Wei. "Let me give you a piece of advice. Save it." Emma pressed a heavy hand onto Mei Wei's shoulder. "This world was made for the protagonists. Even if your little tricks cause some chaos, a supporting character like you will never be able to shake us." Emma's face moved closer, her eyes glowing with a cold violet light. Instead of regretting it later, Mei Wei looked away from her. "If you really believed that so completely, you wouldn't have come to see me." Emma's expression instantly stiffened. "What?" Gaeldake burst in through the doorway, waving his arm excitedly. "Found it! We found it! All the crimes and corruption you've committed all this time. It's over." Gaeldake smiled brightly, clutching a stack of ledgers to his chest. Mei Wei cried out excitedly. "Oh, I knew it." Documents fluttered down. They were filled with evidence of crimes. Mei Wei anxiously asked, What about the trial? Gale replied. We're making preparations as quickly as possible. Mei Aiwei looked over the documents, her face shining with victorious joy. The spy planted in the imperial palace has been exposed for embezzlement. The assassin guild they were raising can be wiped out within a week. Emma stood by the bookshelf and asked coldly, Do you really think that will change anything? Mei Aiwei stepped toward her. Of course, because I'll make sure it changes. Then I'll see you in court. A flash of killing intent passed through Mei Aiwei's eyes. Bring in Miss Emma. The gavel came down, its sound echoing through the solemn courtroom. The verdict was read aloud. Bradley Lindsay, head of the Lindsay family, is sentenced to death. His eldest and second sons, as accomplices, are sentenced to life imprisonment. Emma stood rigid in the dock. Impossible. Emma's face twisted. This is a conspiracy. Mei Aiwei looked down at her, eyes cold. You don't look remotely repentant. Emma ground her teeth, staring straight ahead. Mei Aiwei's gaze pierced across the courtroom. Do you still think this world exists only for you? Emma's cheeks flushed faintly, her eyes full of disbelief. You witch, this is all you're doing, isn't it? This isn't how the story was supposed to go. Her face contorted as she lunged at Mei Aiwei. It's all because of you. Mei Aiwei hunched her shoulders and shut her eyes instinctively. She's going to hit me. Li Him suddenly appeared, wrapping an arm around Mei Aiwei from behind and pulling her away. Emma missed and crashed hard to the floor. Collapsed on the ground, Emma cried out in terror, Your Majesty. She looked up. Li Him stood in front of Mei Aiwei, glaring at Emma. How dare you touch my fiancé? Emma sat on the floor in despair, her voice breaking as she screamed. Your Majesty, I've been framed. Our family has devoted itself to the Empire. This is a conspiracy. Can't you see that? Li Him's face was as cold as still water. I'll ask you again. What did you do to my fiancé? She is to become the mother of the Empire. You dared say such things to my fiancé right in front of me. I can only take that as a direct insult to me. Emma's voice trembled. Your Majesty, Li Him gave the order. Gale, remove this woman from my sight. Let's go. 2 guards hauled Emma to her feet. Your Majesty, this isn't fair. Your Majesty. And no, it can't end like this. The guards dragged her away as she desperately stretched out a hand. Your Majesty, please listen to me just once. Your Majesty. Li Him paused mid-step. Mei Aiwei looked up, confusion filling her eyes. HM? She rubbed her eyes. Is it because she's too far away? That woman's title looks so blurry. I became the vicious villainess of a count's family. A flash of blue light passed by. Emma's body suddenly went limp. A noble woman watching nearby gasped. Good heavens, did she faint? That title from the book. Mei Aiwei's eyes widened in shock. It disappeared. The atmosphere in the office was heavy. A man bent over a report. Of the 56 high officials Your Majesty ordered investigated, all have now been confirmed to be involved in serious corruption. Punishments have been carried out according to the severity of their crimes, ranging from execution to confiscation of assets and revocation of titles. He pushed the report across the desk and tapped the surface lightly. All the details are recorded in this document. Li Him folded his arms. And the public response? The man answered, It varies by class. The nobles are deeply unsettled, while the commoners are overjoyed. Mei Aiwei's eyes lit up instantly, and her face brightened with delight. Leaning toward Li Him, she smiled and flashed a victory sign. In other words, a total success. And it's all thanks to my information. Li Him remained expressionless. You could put it that way. The man added, at least until the effects of the administrative vacuum begin to show. Behind his glasses, his eyes were cold, an ominous sign. Mei Aiwei's smile stiffened. Why did the atmosphere suddenly freeze? Gale folded his hands and stared at them both, his gaze sharp as a blade. His voice was calm. Please tell me, Your Majesty, if the central granaries are flooded and the food supply runs short, how do you intend to respond? If arrogant nobles in the West rise in rebellion, and pirates on the eastern coast begin plundering the people. If all disasters strike at once like a storm, do you truly believe the people will still support you then? Mei Aiwei went pale, cold sweat running down her face. Lord Chancellor, why are you pressing so hard? Li Him curled his lips into a cold smile. Was I mistaken about you? Because it sounds very much as if you're blaming me for refusing to turn a blind eye to their crimes. Mei Aiwei clapped a hand over her mouth in alarm. Don't get angry, Your Majesty. The Chancellor's expression did not change. A ruler pursuing great wealth and glory must also consider the smallest details. Removing them before cultivating successors was clearly a reckless decision. Li Him's eyes sharpened. Or are you simply resentful because the base of support you built so carefully has collapsed? The air turned icy in an instant. Mei Aiwei quietly raised a hand, trying to calm things down. Excuse me, Lord Chancellor. I think there is one thing you may have overlooked. The Chancellor lifted a brow. And what would that be? Mei Aiwei straightened her back, her voice firm. Because it concerns confidential matters, we didn't inform you in advance. We've already prepared countermeasures. I can't tell you exactly what they are, but if you can wait just a little longer, the problem will definitely be solved. Breaking the silence, the Chancellor asked, How long? Mei Aiwei instantly faltered. The Chancellor leaned forward. Give me a specific time. 1 week. The Chancellor sat in the shadows, wearing his glasses. Mei Aiwei sprang to her feet. Just give us 1 week. When that time comes, it won't be too late for you to judge the results. Mei Aiwei stood straight and firm, her gaze unwavering as she awaited the Chancellor's verdict. He said nothing, merely tapping the armrest lightly. Mei Aiwei collapsed to her knees, shrouded in despair. I messed up. I really messed up. According to the usual romance novel pattern, this kind of scene should have led to romance. Li Him would have pulled her into his arms and gently caressed her cheek on a balcony showered with flower petals. But reality was that she had personally promised a 1-week deadline. No, there's no need to despair. Mei Aiwei, I can still change the plan. Mei Aiwei walked alone through the garden, sunlight pouring over the roses. I'll quickly finish the second task, then devote myself fully to the emotional plotline of the third task. She made up her mind. Her hand brushed lightly over a blooming rose. And besides, this task actually isn't difficult. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. A woman in pink heels approached. Mei Aiwei sat at the table with her back to the door. The door was pushed open. A hand in a black glove rested against the frame. I heard you were looking for me. Mei Aiwei slowly turned around, surprise flickering in her eyes. The woman entered in a red and black gown, her long hair as red as blood. My master once told me that if you want to find a capable heroine, it's simple. Just look for combinations of key words in the titles. Remember one thing. True pearls are often buried in mud. Ability, arrogance, schemes, genius. Among these overused keywords, the real jewel is a reborn villainess. Footsteps sounded. Then another set. A curtain of long purple hair came into view. Mei Aiwei stood and bowed slightly. I came here for one reason only, to meet the queen among villainesses, Olivia Cruz. Olivia wore a gorgeous red and black gown. Make yourself comfortable. In a reception room of Marchioness Cruz, Mei Aiwei closed her eyes, inhaling the elegant fragrance of tea. With a smile, she said, This tea smells wonderful. Olivia looked at the guest across from her. You flatter me. The other woman replied with a smile. Compared to the tea served at the palace, this is barely presentable. Mei Aiwei smiled coldly. She's definitely on guard. Mei Aiwei set down her teacup. I trust you don't think I came here without a purpose? My lady, I'll be direct. Olivia's gaze was steady. Mei Aiwei said, I've spent almost my entire life in Ivy territory. I haven't been in the capital for long. I'm sure you understand what I'm getting at. A trace of expectation appeared in Olivia's eyes. I need to build connections and have people who will stand completely on my side. I hope to establish that kind of relationship with the Jasmine Club. The noble women gathered around them, as if surrounding the moon among stars. The Jasmine Club was a tea circle centered around Marchioness Olivia Cruz. Its members were all in similar situations, abandoned by family, persecuted by society, and shrouded in vicious rumors. After her rebirth, Olivia devoted herself to gathering women who shared the same fate as her. It was a kind of grace. The purple-haired guest smiled faintly and set down her cup. Cup and saucer clinked with a clear sound. What she might not know was that half the members of the Jasmine Club were just like her, women who had become so-called villainesses after being reborn. They were the core members of the Jasmine Club, So if Mei Wei wanted to win over those villainesses, she first had to persuade Olivia. Olivia Cruz lifted her teacup. Before I answer you, I'd like to ask a question. Mei Wei raised her head. Yes? Olivia continued. Half a year ago, one member was taken by the Security Bureau on suspicion of murdering her younger sister. Another member, Lady Dorothy, was expelled from her family for setting fire to the main estate. And our emotional pillar, Countess Powell, is rumored to preserve her beauty with the blood of young girls. As for me, you already know, I caused my mother's death the moment I was born. As I grew older, my sisters died one by one. After I married, my husband died too. My curse is said to be a talent, one that draws people similar to me. But I'm not a fool. I know they call me the Witch of Death behind my back. Olivia gave a proud smile. Our club is full of women burdened with that sort of reputation. We're not the sort of people someone like your highness would normally take an interest in. As a leader of this club, I have to ask. Olivia leaned forward, her gaze sharp as a blade. What is the real reason you want to stand with us? Just as I thought, not a single opening. As expected of the sharpest mind in a romance novel world. She was just as hard to crack, but that was fine. My mentor once taught me how to deal with villainesses. Don't try to confront a villainess head-on. Their loneliness is far greater than you imagine. So you're telling me to give up on them? What I mean is, take the indirect route. Strike right at their weak point. It's simpler than you think. A gust of wind passed by. Rose petals scattered through the air. Mei Wei blinked, and one petal landed on her cheek. You only need to become spring itself. Her mentor's voice echoed in her mind. The purple-haired guest in a black dress held up a parasol, doing her best amid the shower of petals. Mei Wei sat in her chair, looking down at Olivia. She recalled her mentor's words. Her pupils contracted, and she bit her lip tightly. At last, she understood what her mentor had really meant. What could melt a cold villainess was the gentleness of spring. So Mei Wei smiled. It seems you've misunderstood. Your reputations don't trouble me in the slightest. In fact, I can see deep inside every one of you. Light shone in Mei Wei's eyes. She quietly waited as that radiance seemed to sparkle around her. A warm and tender heart. Hit them with the most embarrassing lines imaginable. Olivia's eyes widened at the sight before her. It was like watching a grand stage performance. Mei Wei formed a heart with both hands in front of her chest. A heart more delicate and lovely than anyone else's. A heart that will never be crushed by the jealousy or slander of foolish, greedy people. That is your true nature. Mei Wei suddenly stood up. A noble resolve. Someone like you is exactly the person I've been searching for. Mei Wei's smile stiffened. Her expression twisted as she clenched both hands. A servant picked up the silver bell on the table and gave it a gentle ring. Olivia looked at the flustered Mei Wei. My apologies, but something urgent has come up. I must leave first. Mei Wei stared in shock. What? Mei Wei's smile froze completely. She reached both hands forward as if trying to grab the opportunity before it slipped away. Wait! The hem of her red dress swept past as high heels clicked farther away. Olivia turned and gave her a faint smile. This was a pleasant time, Miss May. She left without looking back. The door slammed shut, leaving Mei Wei standing there alone. How would you just leave like that? Her whole body trembled. Master, what was that supposed to mean? He said the sweetest, most syrupy lines were the best weapon for persuasion. Mei Wei clawed at her hair and let out a frustrated scream. Under the moonlight stood a magnificent castle, one tower stabbing into the night sky. Mei Wei walked along dejectedly. The scenery around her seemed childish and overly colorful. She stopped and clasped her hands in front of her. This was the first time her master's strategy had failed, and for now, she couldn't rely on him either. Mei Wei's eyes hardened. Don't panic. There are still 6 days left. There has to be a way. A voice came from afar. She turned in confusion. What? April was talking to a woman. A soft glow surrounded them. The woman turned gracefully. Then I'll see you that day. Mei Wei walked down the steps. Light and shadows stretched behind her. April. April froze. Why was she here? April's gaze passed beyond her long hair toward Mei Wei in the distance. That figure left her confused. The vast, luxurious hall was brilliantly lit. April stood in the middle of the hall and looked up at the person before her. What are you doing here? Mei Wei stood on the steps, a teasing smile curling her lips. Do I look like a ghost? Relax. You should be greeting your sister with a smile. Thanks for your hasty advice, by the way. Mai Aiwei smiled confidently. But once the real Aiwei comes back, that's what you'll need to worry about. So don't concern yourself. April abruptly stepped back. Oh, really? I thought you'd finally grown a conscience. Her smile froze. How naive of me. You insisted on appearing with me, and it wasn't even to ruin my coming-of-age ceremony. I failed to notice it then, but now I know. April. April's eyes turned cold. The real reason you did that. April stood on the banquet hall balcony. The tyrant, Li Him. The possessed heroine, Su and Kai. Their unforgettable first encounter after prison. April took a step back and crashed into a solid chest. Startled, she turned around, her cheek brushing against the man's clothes. My deepest apologies. April looked up and saw the man's face clearly. Your Majesty. Li Him looked down at her, a smile tugging at his lips. The tyrant's encounter. This key scene that was supposed to belong to me. A trace of contempt flashed through April's eyes. So that's what this is about. You're really greedy, aren't you? Stealing your younger sister's man. April's gaze was razor sharp. Don't you think you're a terrible sister? Mai Aiwei glared at April. Don't be ridiculous. I only have one goal. To drive you out. April suddenly burst into laughter. She bent over, her cackling laughter high and grating. Resting one hand against her chin, she sneered. What touching sisterly affection. But what can you do? You struggle so desperately, and yet everything always goes back to where it was. April turned around. You asked why I'm here? Obviously, I have business. April spread her arms wide, flowers blooming behind her like a fantasy scene. I've become His Majesty's sparring partner, so we'll be seeing each other often from now on. Aiwei's pupils widened. The situation was almost too perfect. It was as if the world itself were whispering to Su and Kai. Go reclaim the male lead who was stolen from you. He belonged to you in the first place. Just like that, April smiled with a trace of pity. Aiwei's hands clenched into fists. Just like that. To be honest, she felt lost. Mei Aiwei's face darkened. Her master was unreachable for now. Her plan to buy over the villains was nowhere near success. And now even Su and Kai. April's phantom smiled among the flowers. Don't be too discouraged. That's just how this world works. April's smile widened. Everything revolves around the protagonist. Supporting characters get nothing. Mai Aiwei lowered her eyes. Sweat slid down her skin. Not love. Li Him's back appeared in her thoughts. Not hope either. Not even this insignificant body. Insignificant body. Mai Aiwei's face twisted with rage, and her trembling body went rigid. April stroked her smooth cheek. Oh, sorry. I accidentally said what I was really thinking. Mai Aiwei burned with fury. She suddenly swung her arm. April caught Mai Aiwei's wrist like lightning. Hey, April's eyes turned icy. I'll let your hair go, but your cheek is another matter. How dare you insult Aiwei in front of me? April's gaze sharpened. Since you don't understand current trends, let me teach you. These days, the heroines of romantic fantasy novels are strong. Mai Aiwei stared at her in shock. April's black boot stepped forward. A girl like you. I can't even touch the whip. April grabbed Mai Aiwei's hair and violently threw herself toward the floor. With a twisted smile, April said, See that? The world is on my side. She looked at Mai Aiwei. What are you doing? Mai Aiwei raised her head, eyes full of terror and confusion. April suddenly seized her hand and slapped her own face with it. April let out a short scream and crashed heavily onto the floor. Mai Aiwei stared at the scene in horror. Wait, footsteps approached. A cold voice rang out. What's all this noise? Mai Aiwei looked up in shock. It was Li Him. Li Him's gaze turned icy. I asked what you're making such a fuss about. Mai Aiwei clenched her hands tightly. Her whole body trembled. Your Majesty, this is a misunderstanding. April collapsed on the floor, struggling to sit up. Sister, she only. A hand over her chest. She tried to explain. She only wanted to guide me onto the right path. Li Him's eyes were cold. Your wording obscures the truth. I merely asked for an explanation of the situation. April's cheek was swollen and red. Eyes closed, she said, It's just a small quarrel between sisters. Li Him's gaze sharpened. So because you had a sisterly argument, you struck her? Mai Aiwei rushed forward. I can explain. She grabbed Li Him's sleeve. Li Him took her hand. You don't look well today. Go back and rest first. Mai Aiwei froze. Well, Li Him closed his eyes and let out a soft sigh. I only wish you would understand your fiancé's good intentions. Mai Aiwei stood there, as though darkness were swallowing her whole. Her face went pale. I see. He has no intention of hearing my explanation. No matter what I say now. Lihim gave an order to the red-haired man beside him. Gaildake, escort Miss May back to her room. Gaildake extended a hand. Cool me. May Iway obediently leaned toward Gaildake and let him lead her away. I do understand his position. In a situation like this, everything I said would sound like an excuse. He had no choice. He could only choose to believe April, not me. I knew that perfectly well. But why? May Iway held back her tears, her eyes rimmed red. Why did I feel like crying? The long corridor was silent and empty. Lihim stared at April's swollen cheek. Your face is swollen. That was harsh. If she'd been wearing a ring, it might have left a terrible scar. April lowered her head. I'm Fina. It's not the first time. She lifted her head again. More importantly, please go after my sister. She may be a little sensitive, but she's not a bad person. If you just comfort her. Lihim let out a cold laugh. Huh. Lihim looked down at April, the corner of his mouth lifting in contempt. You seem to think very little of me. April froze. What? Lihim's voice grew even colder. You are my fiancé's only sister, greedy, shameless, and utterly foolish. Don't you even know this much? Someone with combat training can easily read an opponent's movements. April's eyes widened. Her whole body shook. Lihim stared down at her. I sent May away not because I believed your lies, but because I didn't want to leave her in a position where she couldn't stop defending you. April clenched both fists, utterly confused. Wait, this isn't how I thought this would go. The Chancellor walked over and stood at Lihim's side. He wore glasses, his expression frigid. Lihim questioned April. Why did you make May Iway slap your own face? His eyes were glacial. Why bring me this humiliation? May Iway gasped in bed, her body curled tightly into itself. She clutched the blanket. Couldn't he have taken my side just once? I'm his fiancé. Why does he only listen to April? Is this some kind of romance novel rule? Can the male lead only listen to the heroine? Why am I just a side character instead of the heroine? At this point, I'd rather be the villain. Anything would be better than this. Parents playing favorites, sisters bullying me, pressure from the entire world, and a genius fiancé. I've collected every classic villain setting there is. May Iway stared at herself in the mirror. The girl in the reflection looked miserable. Tear tracks clung to the corners of her eyes. May Iway suddenly opened them wide. Wait, is it a face problem? She sat up in bed and raked irritably at her hair. Damn it, this stupid event. If I were a reborn villainess, I would have sent April flying already. May Iway suddenly froze. Her gaze locked in place. Why didn't I think of that? She sat bolt upright. Now I understand why Olivia Cruz rejected my proposal and how to make her stand on my side. A smile spread across May Iway's face, her eyes gleaming. A plan had already taken shape. She rushed out the door and ordered the maid outside. Daisy, go to the kitchen at once. Tell them to bake 20 sets of cakes and pastries within 2 hours. The maid, Daisy, froze. 2 hours? May Iway turned around. Yes, because I'm inviting the ladies of the Jasmine Club. Philip, May Iway looked at the short-haired, brown-haired male servant. The invitations are your responsibility. No matter what, make sure every last one of them comes. Philip looked flustered, but I'm just a lowly servant. Can I really handle something this important? May Iway turned with a smile. Don't worry. There's a magic phrase that'll make them all come. Philip asked in confusion. A magic phrase? May Iway leaned in. If the ladies hesitate, add this line. Miss May has prepared an engagement gift for everyone. Philip and Daisy stood there dumbfounded, holding baskets filled with invitations. Under the crystal chandelier, people whispered among themselves. Their gazes met. Olivia sat at the table with several noble ladies. The atmosphere was delicate. Footsteps sounded. May Iway approached the table with a smile. Everyone, thank you for accepting my invitation. May Iway looked around at them all. I'm sure everyone is curious about the purpose of today's tea party, so I'll get straight to the point. The mood shifted. You've all heard about the recent purge, haven't you? The scene shifted to a dark hall. Guards raised red banners as several people were taken away. A purge was underway. Mei Ai continued, those corrupt nobles are gone, but their positions are still vacant. I want to give those positions to the most capable people in the empire. She looked toward the noble ladies seated before her. In other words, to the members of the Jasmine Club who are here today. Olivia gave a faint laugh. Miss May, I think there has been some misunderstanding between us. Resting her chin on one hand, she said, the Jasmine Club is by no means interested in getting on the same boat as you. Mei Ai's tone left no room for doubt. No, you will. She placed both hands on the table. Leaning forward, she said, because I can give you what you desire most. Her fingers dug into the tabletop. It's already too late to back out now. You've already heard what I have to say. Olivia suddenly stood up. Philip called out, please wait. My lady insisted that I pass this message to you. Mei Ai leaned in and whispered in her ear. A small gift has been prepared for the tea party's participants. If you accept the invitation, the person you fear most. A smile appeared on Mei Ai's lips. That I will remove them for you. The noblewoman with dark purple hair stood frozen, her expression cold. Evelyn folded her hands and lifted the corner of her mouth. You certainly have an impressive imagination. Olivia laughed softly. It embarrasses me to say it myself, but we are all daughters of distinguished families. One hand over her chest, she said, I am the eldest daughter of the Gale family, a noble house older than the empire itself. My husband, Marquis Cruz, is the same. Countess Roll owns mines that produce priceless magic stones, more valuable than diamonds. Miss Bill's father owns the famous Alban Merchant Guild. Olivia smiled confidently. We possess wealth that common ruffians could never burn through. Who would dare threaten a member of the Jasmine Club? In an instant, her eyes turned cold, her jaw tightening. Mei Ai rested one cheek on her hand. Well then. A playful smile crossed her face. Shall we start counting abusive parents? She continued listing them. Younger sisters who plotted to murder their elder sisters for inheritance. She paused. And husbands consumed by jealousy. And brothers who gambled away the family fortune. Olivia held her teacup, her hand trembling slightly. Did you investigate our backgrounds? Mei Ai smiled. Isn't that what one might call the basic etiquette of a noble lady? The teacup gave a soft clink against the table. Olivia's face went pale. I merely informed you in advance of the troubles you might run into. Mei Ai turned away. I don't understand. When there's a simple and safe road, why insist on taking the long way around? Olivia answered coldly, because there is no trust between us. Her gaze was contemptuous. You have no real accomplishments, and your reputation is terrible. Why are you so obsessed with us? Mei Ai replied, I know that many of those achievements actually belong to you, and I know how your families treat you. The noble ladies fell silent. The atmosphere grew heavy. Mei Ai watched their reactions. Her eyes dimmed. As expected, what moved villainesses wasn't sweet talk. It was what they truly wanted, the power to protect themselves. Mei Ai looked puzzled. Reputation? I don't understand why you keep bringing that up. I only care about who you truly are. She crossed her arms. And I already told you. I can see the warmth in your hearts. Olivia looked up, visibly shaken. The one person who believed in them. Mei Ai let out a satisfied sigh. Enough. I feel completely drained. She collapsed onto the table, utterly exhausted. Your Majesty. A voice sounded. Mei Ai lifted her head sharply. Li Him was standing not far away. Why are you here? Li Him stepped closer. May I borrow a moment of your time? Mei Ai immediately sat up straight. Oh, of course. A wave of dizziness struck her, and her body swayed. She collapsed to the floor. Something was wrong. A maid rushed forward. Miss. The maid supported Mei Ai. She was just fine a moment ago. Why all of a sudden? Ai's eyes widened. I am dizzy. She looked at the maid holding her. Why is this person? The maid was smiling. In that instant, I instinctively understood. Poison. Someone poisoned me. But why? Who could it be? The maid knelt. Miss, are you all right? Can you stand? The maid suddenly seized Mei Ai's wrist. Her grip was unexpectedly strong. The maid whispered, Miss April told me to give you a message. That's right. You shouldn't covet what belongs to others. April raised one finger to her lips, smiling strangely. So is you, April. Mei Ai's head dropped weakly. The maid's body went limp as well. Mei Ai completely lost consciousness and fell onto the cold floor. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the empty room. The doctor believes it was only a small amount of poison. As long as she takes her medicine on time, her life won't be in danger. My head hurts. Quiet. Mei Aiwei slowly opened her eyes. Her eyelids felt heavy. Where am I? I was poisoned. Mei Aiwei jolted awake and sat up. She looked to the other side of the room. Two people were standing there. Those two were. Mei Aiwei squinted, trying to make out their faces. One of them was the Emperor. Could this be that moment? The poisoned heroine in a novel-style scene. The heroine is poisoned and nearly dies, and the male lead either realizes his feelings or their relationship deepens. I absolutely cannot waste an opportunity like this. Mei Aiwei lay back on the bed and gave a sly smile. I'll just keep pretending to be sick for now. Perfect. Li Him looked at the doctor. I'll summon you again later. The doctor bowed. I shall take my leave first. The doctor left the room. Li Him stood there in silence. Mei Aiwei kept her eyes closed. Why is he so quiet? Li Him turned and walked toward the bed. Why does he keep staring at me? Mei Aiwei kept her eyes shut, her heart racing. Did he figure it out? Li Him clenched his fist, then slowly relaxed it. He reached out and gently touched Mei Aiwei's forehead. Good. It seems the fever's gone down a little. Calm down, Mei Aiwei, or you'll give yourself away. Her cheeks burned. Her heart pounded like a drum. Li Him turned toward the door. Is Gale there? Gale Dake answered from outside the door. Yes, Your Majesty. Li Him stood with his back to the room. What about Mei's maid? What are they talking about? Mei Aiwei strained to listen. Gale Dake replied gravely, My apologies, Your Majesty. We've conducted a thorough search, but found no clues at all. Too strange. Li Him's expression darkened. The scene was cleaned up too perfectly, as though everything had been arranged in advance solely to poison Mei. That mysterious enemy who had kept sending assassins ever since his coronation. Li Him's gaze turned sinister. Could their target have expanded to include my fiancée? A bloodstained photograph had been pinned in the heart. In the picture, a girl smiled brightly with a V sign, while a vertical blade pierced through her head. If that's true, then Mei is suffering because of me. Li Him spoke in a low voice. Gale. Gale Dake answered. Li Him ordered, I authorize you to form an investigation team. At any cost, find that missing maid. No, absolutely not. This cannot happen. Mei Aiwei's eyes widened. If April's crime were exposed, she would be chained in heavy irons and forced to kneel before the cold throne awaiting judgment. April deserved punishment, yes, but I have to stop His Majesty somehow. Mei Aiwei trembled as she sat up in bed. She grabbed Li Him's hand to stop him from leaving. Li Him turned in surprise. Mei. Li Him immediately turned back and supported Mei Aiwei. Are you all right? How are you feeling? Mei Aiwei looked up. I'm Yufine. More importantly, she hesitated. Your Majesty. Folding her hands together, Mei Aiwei pleaded, please reconsider. Don't pursue that maid any further. Li Him frowned. What do you mean? Mei Aiwei gripped the bedsheet tightly. The truth was, everything had been part of my plan. To persuade the villains, I needed to stage a scene where I collapsed from poisoning. I may have been too hasty, but it wasn't the maid's fault. Li Him bent down, lips parting slightly. So you're saying the whole thing was staged by you? Mei Aiwei lowered her eyes. I'm sorry for making you worry, but I was pressed for time and had no other choice. Li Him turned around. Who gave you permission to gamble with your life? Mei Aiwei leaned forward, staring at him in shock. What? Li Him's face was veiled in shadow. I don't recall ever granting you permission for that. His brows were tightly drawn. What could possibly be so important that you'd act this recklessly? Is your life worth so little that you'd risk it over something like this? Li Him suddenly sat down. Mei Aiwei looked at him. I see now. He's this angry because he was worried about me. A hint of warmth appeared in Aiwei's eyes, and her lips lifted slightly. Thank you for worrying about me, but it wasn't something trivial. Li Him said nothing. Though it was only for a short time, I could tell. There's something you want from the Chancellor. You've always wanted his acknowledgement. Li Him's eyes sharpened. What are you talking about? A knock sounded at the door. The Chancellor entered. My apologies for interrupting your conversation, but his expression was grave. Something has happened. The room grew tense. Li Him unfolded a document. The Chancellor reported, a month ago, I submitted a report regarding an outbreak of an infectious animal disease of unknown origin in the Latina territory in the South Central Empire. Do you remember? The epidemic has now spread beyond Latina into the western regions. We urgently dispatched Chad Demir, the head of Albach Academy and an expert in pathology. He confirmed that the disease was being spread by bedbugs. He attempted to take appropriate measures, but the Chancellor looked at Li Him. You dismissed him and threw him into prison. As a result, we still have not found an effective solution. The Chancellor turned a page. There's another report here. Pirates are raging along the Mastair coast, causing enormous losses. Lihim took the document. The Mastair coast? The Chancellor continued. In the end, the Antram fleet repelled the pirates under the Admiral's command. But you sent Admiral Gale to the guillotine. A glint flashed across the Chancellor's lenses as he stared at Lihim. His voice was hard. The crime rate in the capital is serious as well. 6 months ago, the violent crime rate was only 8%. Now it has more than doubled. Lihim tossed the report onto the table. Because I sent Police Chief Feldy into exile. That's what you're implying, isn't it? Mei Wei stood quietly to one side. Her hands folded before her. Lihim shot back. Then tell me, Chancellor, should I have let him remain in office? Even though he abused his authority and manipulated and trampled powerless women, was I supposed to ignore it? The Chancellor lowered his head and said, As I told you before, I do not oppose your Majesty punishing them. But when he looked up again, his eyes were ice cold. The obvious mistake was removing all of them at once. Lihim glared at him. What are you trying to say? You didn't come here just to scold me after the fact, did you? Mei Wei hurried forward. Trying to stop them, she said, Please stop. The Chancellor's concerns can be resolved soon enough. Just give me a little time. I'll find talented people to fill those positions. Hands clasped tightly at her chest, Mei Wei looked utterly earnest. The Chancellor demanded sharply, A mere 20 people? What could you possibly do? Lihim shot to his feet with a roar. Chancellor. The Chancellor ignored the Emperor and turned to Mei Wei. I admit your eye for talent, my lady. Your clever idea of appointing noble daughters reminds me of the former Empress. He gave a short snort. However, the problem is numbers. 20 people is far too few. How can you be so irresponsible? Mei Wei was stunned by the challenge. Then a voice rose from the shadows. Marquis Graham, stop insulting my fiancée. Lihim's expression was cold. This is my final warning. Mei Wei's eyes lit up. So as long as there are enough people, there won't be a problem, right? Mei Wei raised one finger and smiled brightly. Don't worry. My master will solve it. The Chancellor looked baffled. He shook his head slightly. I told you, there's no need to put on airs here. At that moment, Gildake pushed open the door. It slammed loudly against the wall. Mei Wei spoke lightly. I'm serious. Scold me all you want. Great. Finally, I can show off my superior spreadsheet skills. She clenched her fist excitedly. Her finger tapped the table. No computer? Then explain how you're planning to use spreadsheets. A loud shout came from outside. I'm here. The doors were flung open and light poured in. My darling, you must have suffered so much. Your cheeks have gotten so thin. Lihim looked over. So that's the person Mei kept talking about. Gaildake's pupils contracted. Her master. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. I see. Mei Wei poked her head out. I haven't introduced her yet. Mei Wei's voice rang out. This is my master, and also the only younger sister of Duke Lichten. A little girl in a cherry-colored dress stood at the doorway. Her eyes were closed, and her hands planted on her hips. She was Iris Lichten, the late Duke Lichten's precious younger sister, the Duke's cherished darling, a hot-tempered noblewoman, with the body of a 7-year-old and the mind of a 27-year-old. She had crossed into this romance novel twice, and during her first possession had been rejected by Lihim Lichten before ultimately returning to Earth. Mei Wei stood under the figurative spotlight. She spread her arms to the crowd. You may not trust them now, but you'll soon realize just how extraordinary these geniuses are. Because in romance fantasy novels, the villains and the young nobles are always the smartest. Iris Lichten folded her arms. Her gaze was firm. The Chancellor said nothing. He looked down at the children before him, displeasure radiating from him. With restrained politeness, he asked, Miss, may I ask how old you are this year? Iris kept her arms folded. Oh. She raised a fan to cover half her face, a mature smile curling her lips. It's not proper to ask a lady her age so casually. If you doubt my abilities because of my age, then test me first. Give us some time. We will prove our competence to you. The Chancellor pushed up his glasses. Whether you can prove yourselves is a matter for later. Time will reveal everything eventually, so there's no need to hurry. At the moment, I care about only one thing. He stroked his chin, looking perplexed. How are the people supposed to accept a government official who isn't even 10 years old? Mei Wei's voice cut in. You needn't worry. They won't be appointed as officials. The butler looked over at her. With His Majesty's approval, we've established the Imperial Kindergarten. The young ladies will enroll there. The Chancellor stiffened. Imperial Kindergarten? Mei Wei clasped her hands tightly, her eyes shining with excitement. It's a special educational institution that only accepts noble prodigy children between the ages of 6 and 10. Li Him explained with a smile. Publicly, we'll say that the ladies of the Jasmine Club are responsible for the children's education. But the truth is otherwise. Everything has already been arranged, so the young ladies and the members of the Jasmine Club can jointly handle state affairs. The Chancellor fell into thought, one hand under his chin, brows furrowed. In that case, ordinary officials won't realize who is truly behind these policies. Mei Wei beamed. As expected of the Chancellor, you understood the purpose of the Imperial Kindergarten immediately. The Chancellor said nothing, merely staring at her. He's staring right at me. Why is he looking at me like that? I can't read him at all. Mei Wei's smile stiffened as she clenched her fists. Cold sweat ran down her back. Did I say something wrong just now? What fault could he possibly find? The Chancellor finally opened his eyes, the gaze behind his lenses sharp. This plan is quite thorough. Very well. We'll proceed as proposed. Mei Wei's eyes widened and her cheeks flushed. It worked. She spread her arms and threw herself at Li Him. Li Him sidestepped, and Mei Wei missed completely, crashing hard onto the floor. Sorry, I was just too happy. Mei Wei awkwardly pushed herself up, the tip of her nose red. Li Him walked over and gently placed a hand on her head. You've worked hard. He spoke gently. I'll hear the full report later. Mei Wei looked up, her cheeks instantly turning scarlet. Two girls whispered nearby. Wow, the atmosphere is so nice. Mei Wei scratched her head. Can I take this as romantic tension? Well, whatever. Whether it is or not doesn't matter. The success of the plan is enough. A faint blush lingered on Mei Wei's face. Now only one problem remains. All we need is that powder. A few days later, the Chancellor gripped a document tightly, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. He stared at the report, astonishment visible behind his lenses. Incredible. I am truly impressed by these solutions. The plague in Latana has been brought under control thanks to the bedbug repellent developed by Countess Powell. A map was spread across the table, 3 regions marked with purple circles. The antidote is being developed by Elia Barberini of the Imperial Kindergarten. Pirate ships battled on a violent sea, masts snapping and cannon fire raging. The pirates on the Mostina coast fell into Miss Bill's trap and are now slaughtering each other. The number of serious crimes in the capital has dropped sharply thanks to the magical ankle restraints invented by Miss Iris. The Chancellor looked through the flood of reports. Remarkable progress had been made in every field. Picking up one document, he said, "To be frank, I can barely remember my predecessor's attacks anymore. Gold coins poured down like a waterfall and piled into mountains. This is the greatest achievement. The national treasury has never been more secure." The Chancellor frowned. Even so, one hand under his chin, confusion filled his eyes. To be honest, I am perplexed. The eldest daughter of Count Ivy, that Mei Wei who appeared like a ghost and swept through the entire empire. Could she really be the wise one prophesied by the late Empress Agnes? The Chancellor sat deep in thought at his desk. He pulled open a drawer. A small red pouch lay quietly inside. The Chancellor took it out. Time will reveal everything. It will prove whether Mei Wei truly deserves that position. Then the furious roar of a crowd shook the sky. Fraud! Mei Wei, step down. Step down. A group of furious children held signs high. One girl shouted through a megaphone, "Step down, step down. Lichen family, get out. Give us back our food, our homes, and our clothes." Iris faced the protesting crowd. Flustered, she tried to explain, "Please wait a moment. We really aren't lying anymore. Mei Wei said we're doing everything we can. Importing that powder requires a lot of procedures." A servant came running over in panic. Miss Mei, something terrible has happened. The members of the Jasmine Club that have been overworked, and they've been fainting one after another. Mei Wei turned back in shock. They fainted? A messenger rushed up to her with an urgent report. Another one just now. Mei Wei looked anxious. She tugged on Iris's sleeve. "Miss, what do we do? The ladies can't hold on much longer." Iris gritted her teeth, her face dark. She took a deep breath, and her eyes turned resolute. There is no other choice. We'll have to use our final method. Mei Aiwei's eyes widened. The final method? Across from Lawrence Street, among the elegant mansions, stood an inconspicuous tavern on the corner. Its regular customers were all butlers from the nearby estates. The tavern looked shabby. The food looked unhygienic and questionable, yet the place was always packed. There was only one reason. A ruby ring fell onto the wooden floor. It glimmered faintly. This was the secret base of a legendary smuggling ring. As long as the price was right, you could get your hands on anything. Mei Aiwei stopped walking and looked up at the tavern. If it's here, we should be able to get that powder. Iris turned back and asked, "Are you ready?" Igriegajis. Mei Aiwei put her hands on her hips confidently. "I've already organized all the smugglers of this era." Mei Aiwei pushed open the tavern door. The wooden door creaked harshly. The two of them walked into the dim tavern and were immediately thrown back out. A bearded man waved them off frivolously. "Beat it, kids." Iris shouted furiously, "You criminal. What's it to you?" Mei Aiwei panicked. "What do we do now?" If this keeps up, the promise we made to the ladies, but Iris only looked smug. "Don't worry. Who do you think I am?" She proudly held up a rolled parchment. "You'll soon realize you just missed out on a rising star of the smuggling world." Iris grabbed Mei Aiwei's hand. "Stop hesitating. Mei, let's go." They went to another tavern and knocked on the door. Another cold rejection greeted them. They were completely ignored. At the next tavern, the answer was the same. Iris dropped to her knees, dark energy radiating around her. How is this possible? How could we get rejected this many times? I'm the heroine of a romance novel. Mei Aiwei cautiously poked her head out. Is it still not too late to go back and renegotiate? Iris suddenly whipped around. No. Iris grabbed Mei Aiwei by the collar. You have no idea how obsessed they are with that stuff. Mei Aiwei lowered her head in frustration. Was there really no other way? Iris suddenly looked up. Mei, it would be such a waste to give up this quickly. Did you forget? Iris smiled confidently. We still have him. Night fell. A magnificent ducal estate blazed with light. The man frowned. Let me make sure I understand. You need to secretly return something, and you need my help. He was Iris's elder brother, Cedric Lichton, who had once helped Mei at her debut ball. Iris put her hands on her hips and stood up. That's right. Cedric frowned. Smuggling? Iris flashed a bright smile. Yes. Cedric fell silent. Mei Aiwei thought, I definitely didn't plan for this. Cedric rubbed his temples. No, it's too dangerous. Iris rolled around on the sofa. Please, help us. Cedric's tone was firm. On one condition. While I help you and Lady Mei with this request, you must stay quietly in your room. Can you do that? Iris hung upside down over the sofa. She stuck out a hand. Deal. Mei Aiwei stared at Iris in horror. Absolutely not. Iris ran over, cupping her cheeks and batting her eyes. Brother, please, please. Iris wants to go too. Cedric refused harshly. No. Cedric smiled at Mei Aiwei. Let's go. All right. The two of them quickly left the room, leaving Iris behind. In the night, pages were rapidly turned. As expected of Mei Aiwei, Lihim sat at his desk. The smugglers he had personally recruited worked cleanly and efficiently. Even the Chancellor would not be able to accuse him easily over this. Mei Aiwei spoke firmly. 1 week. Just 1 week. Lihim tapped his chin with a finger. The reason she was so confident, that was because she had already seen through what he longed for. Your Majesty has always wanted the Chancellor's approval, hasn't he? A strange look flickered in Lihim's eyes. Something felt wrong. He clutched at his chest. Lately, whenever something happened, his chest would tighten. It felt as if. Lihim looked up toward the window. His heart was pounding violently, almost like an addiction. The sound of hooves echoed through the night, and the carriage jolted with the motion. Cedric sat inside the carriage. Mei Aiwei clasped her hands tightly. So awkward she felt like she might suffocate. Should she speak to him first? What if he hated her? Rumor said he despised women. He was practically a demon from her imagination. Mei Aiwei forced out a smile and gathered her courage. Cedric said coldly, I have one request. Mei Aiwei answered, yes. Cedric continued, I will help you obtain that powder, as promised to Iris. But during that time, I would like us to avoid unnecessary social interaction. Mei Aiwei stared at him. What? Cedric went on. I ask that you refrain from meaningless small talk and unnecessary physical contact. Mei Aiwei froze. Yes. The carriage kept rumbling onward. Cedric grabbed the door handle and yanked the carriage door open. Two masked assassins turned back in shock. Cedric's expression was icy. Until this is resolved, please stay inside the carriage. Before he finished speaking, he had already leapt outside. In other words, don't form any attachment that might burden me. Cedric drew his sword. Steel flashed. Blood sprayed. Two bodies fell, their shadows twisting under the moonlight. Their target is the carriage, not me. Cedric scanned the woods. More assassins emerged. What a nuisance. I only need to protect Mei Wei. Inside the carriage, Mei Wei trembled. She covered her ears, trying to shut out the sounds of slaughter outside. It wasn't that she doubted him, but the scene was simply too terrifying. Iris stood with her hands on her hips, puffing out her small chest. Her brother was the strongest in the world. Though he was antisocial, there were many things he wanted to protect. He treated other women like weeds. But you're the exception. Iris proudly declared, "That's my brother, Cedric Lichton." Iris gestured animatedly. As long as you're with him, you don't have to fear bandits or assassins. All you need to do is watch gracefully. Watch that bloody battle. Mei Wei's face turned pale, cold sweat running down her back. It's not that I don't trust my master, but for one man to do all this alone. So this is what the status of the Northern Grand Duke means. Suddenly, the carriage door was pulled open. Mei Wei turned in terror. A masked assassin leaned inside. Mei Wei was yanked violently out of the carriage and slammed to the ground. She screamed in terror. A cold blade pressed against her neck. Is my neck still attached? I need to check. Mei Wei trembled, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. The masked assassin looked down at her. No, I'm the one asking questions. Mei Wei shouted. Duke Lichton. Gaeldake's icy gaze locked onto the assassin. He spoke in a terrifyingly calm voice. Let her go. The masked assassin sneered. You think I'll listen to you? Mei Wei struggled. I can't die here. I still have a younger sister to raise. Cedric vanished from where he stood, and in the next instant, he appeared behind the assassin. Mei Wei's whole body shook. Cedric looked down at her. Are you all right? Mei Wei looked up. I'm fine. I'm okay. Back in the carriage, she screamed, clutching her neck as her heart thundered. A flash of cold light cut through the air, and the assassin's head flew upward. The clash of blades rang out endlessly. Mei Wei collapsed onto the floor of the carriage, staring at the assassin's corpse by the door. The one who should have died was me. No, this isn't the time to be sentimental. Her eyes sharpened. More assassins could appear at any moment. I have to be ready. Her gaze fell on the assassin's sword. Right? That sword. Mei Wei gripped the hilt with both hands and pulled hard. Why won't it come out? She used all her strength. The blade didn't budge. Suddenly, a force pulled it free from the corpse. Mei Wei lost her balance and fell backward. She toppled back. Cedric suddenly turned toward the carriage. Was the fight not over? Were there still assassins? Mei Wei said, and no, that's not it. She raised the sword high. I thought it would be better to have a weapon. Cedric looked at her in astonishment. Mei Wei squeezed her eyes shut, swaying. This is bad. One of Mei Wei's shoes had come off onto the carriage floor. She was barefoot on one side. What a troublesome woman. Mei Wei looked down at her foot. I'm sorry. I caused you unnecessary trouble. She looked around in a panic. My shoe. Cedric glanced aside. The ground was covered with broken glass. He bent down and picked up the purple shoe. Mei Wei panicked and clutched her other shoe tightly. I'm sorry. I'll put on myself, Duke. Cedric knelt on one knee, held her ankle, and gently slipped the shoe back on. Then Cedric collapsed against Mei Wei's legs. His eyes were shut, and beads of sweat slid down from his brow. Mei Wei called softly, Duke, please wake up. She shook him anxiously. Duke Cedric. Cedric didn't respond. His breathing was faint. An empty wine bottle lay on the floor. Dark liquid had spilled everywhere. Mei Wei clasped her hands together and asked with a nervous smile, Are you afraid of women? So much that if one touches you, you can barely breathe? Inside the carriage, Mei Wei and Cedric sat facing each other. Cedric's eyes drifted away. Well, that wasn't all that strange. In romance fantasy stories, the Northern Duke was one of the most popular male lead jobs. Just imagine how many heroines had gone after him. A brown-haired woman cried, I'll heal your wounded heart. Another woman lunged forward. We're destined to be together. and another clutched her face in horror. You belong to me. Mei Wei crossed her arms. If he'd been dealing with heroines like that since childhood, being afraid of women was completely understandable. Wait. Mei Wei widened her eyes. Then what about my coming-of-age ball? Cedric stiffened. I drank 5 bottles of sedative just to get through it. Cedric's gaze was steady. I know it must seem ridiculous to others. He lowered his head. I was taught from a young age to make rational judgments and logical decisions. I used to believe that was the only correct way to live. But strangely, whenever it comes to Iris, all of that becomes meaningless. A faint smile touched Cedric's lips. Iris's laughter echoed in his memory. Just hearing it makes me feel like I could do anything. Mei Wei lowered her head with a smile, clasping her hands tightly. A warm feeling rose in her heart. I think I understand how you feel. Because I have someone like that too. Someone precious. Someone I'd gamble everything to get back. Mei Wei smiled, her cheeks flushed. Cedric looked at her in silence. Then he lowered his head, and the faintest smile crossed his lips. It was the relief of being completely understood. The fire crackled. The luxurious room was as warm as spring. A brown-haired doctor slipped a stethoscope inside Li Him's clothing. Li Him's expression was grave. I see. The doctor withdrew the stethoscope. You said your heart sometimes races violently, correct? You also mentioned shortness of breath, body heat, and sleeplessness. Li Him kept his eyes closed. Yes. The doctor put the stethoscope away. Forgive me for speaking frankly, Your Majesty, but there is nothing wrong with your body. Li Him ordered, examine me again. The doctor looked troubled. I've already examined you repeatedly. The result won't change. Li Him suddenly gripped his own collar. These symptoms always worsened after seeing trade-in. Could he have used some rare poison that evaporated quickly and left no trace? A voice interrupted. Your Majesty. A figure appeared at the door. Gaildake entered. Forgive me for coming so late. Gaildake reported, I just received a report from the chief inspector. Lady Mei was attacked by assassins. Li Him shot to his feet. Mei, how is she? Gaildake continued. Fortunately, Duke Lichten volunteered to escort her, so Lady Mei narrowly escaped unharmed. She was not seriously injured. Duke Lichten? Li Him's eyes turned instantly cold. You mean Cedric Lichten? He turned away. Gaildake, tell me, why was that man with my fiancée? Gaildake lowered his head. It seems they were trying to obtain some kind of powder, but the exact details are still unclear. Powder? Li Him stroked his chin. Yes, we had everyone investigate what kind of powder they were after. We only know it is made from the fruit of a plant not native to the Ashkea continent. Beyond that, we learn nothing. Is the powder poison? No, but even if it isn't, I can't ignore it. Several years ago, a baron's mistress was discovered secretly purchasing a powder that drove people mad in an attempt to seize her husband's property. Could my recurring chest pains? Because of that, Li Him dismissed the doctor. You may leave now. The doctor turned and departed. Yes, Your Majesty. Li Him continued. Gaildake, issue the order at once. Assign only one knight to serve as Mei's escort. Gaildake bowed. Understood. Li Him turned his face aside, his expression dark. And have someone follow Duke Lichten. Report his every move to me. Yes. Gaildake answered and turned to leave. A few days later, night covered a narrow alley. 2 figures in black robes stood beneath the stairs of a building. One of them looked up. At last, after a long wait, a door creaked open. The day to obtain that powder had finally come. Several heavy sacks were piled on the ground. One of the black-robed figures picked up a sack and weighed it. Looks like a good amount. A smile appeared beneath the hood. It was Mei Wei. She suddenly turned around. Duke Cedric? Cedric drew his sword. This was my mistake. What? Mei Wei stared in disbelief. Cedric said, I noticed too late. We're already surrounded. Mei Wei panicked. What do you mean surrounded? By who? Us. Cedric ordered. Put that down first. Run. Absolutely not. A voice rang out. Neither of you move. Dust billowed at the mouth of the alley. Mei Wei and Cedric were surrounded by knights. As expected of Duke Lichten, you managed to detect the movements of the elite knights I selected myself. It was Gaildake. Mei Wei recognized him. That armor, it belonged to His Majesty the Emperor. Mei Wei demanded, Why are you here? Li Him responded coldly. I should be the one asking that, Mei Wei. Mei Wei's body stiffened. My one and only fiancée. Why is she with another man? Li Him curled his lip, standing in the middle of an illegal smuggling deal. Mei Wei tightened her grip on the sack in her arms, her whole body rigid. She stood there with a golden bundle clutched to her chest, panic written all over her face. This is a misunderstanding. Mei Wei hurriedly explained, I know this looks strange, but it's really not what you think. Li Him interrupted her expressionlessly. Whether it's a misunderstanding or not, we'll know after we investigate. He raised a hand to signal Gaeldake. Mei Wei shouted at once, wait. Please listen to us. Gaeldake's subordinates rushed forward and began piling the goods together. Mei Wei's face filled with despair. She turned to Gaeldake. Then at least leave us one sack. We really need it. Gaeldake refused coldly. Sorry, I can't do that. He snatched the last sack from Mei Wei's arms. Mei Wei clenched her fists tightly. But if this gets delayed any longer, the young ladies may never speak to us again. Her face reddened. The plan I worked so hard on will fall apart. Suddenly, a sack was thrown from beside her and landed on top of the pile. Li Him watched coldly as his men counted the goods. Mei Wei looked up in horror. Cedric was standing in front of her. A flash of steel cut through the air. Blood splattered. The sack was sliced open in an instant. Everyone witnessed it, the deep red powder scattering into the air. Gaeldake and his men stared in shock. Then Gaeldake suddenly sneezed as the powder went up his nose. The others began sneezing one after another, coughing without stop. A fierce, unprecedented spiciness assaulted their mouths, noses, and eyes. Gaeldake covered his nose and mouth and shouted, Cover your noses! It might be poison. A pair of hands hung down weakly, empty. Know the chili powder I worked so hard to get. Mei Wei knelt on the ground, weeping bitterly. Li Him sat on the sofa, his expression stern. So that's it. He continued his questioning. So in order to win over the young ladies, you promised to make them a food they wanted to eat. And to make that food, you needed this smuggled chili powder. Mei Wei lowered her head and nodded hard, her cheeks red with shame. Mei Wei clasped her hands tightly. We can find substitutes for the other ingredients, but not for chili powder. So smuggling was our only option. Li Him's gaze sharpened. Then why did you choose to work with Duke Lichten, of all people? Mei Wei hesitated. Duke Lichten, that's because. She continued, because Duke Lichten is family to my master. Li Him said nothing. He pressed a finger against his lower lip, hiding his wavering feelings. The explanation was reasonable. But I still can't trust you. Mei Wei raised her teacup. I'll decide after I see the result. She smiled confidently. You will trust me. I'm sure of it. Tableware clinked softly. A lavish spread of Korean dishes was laid out before them. Steam rose from the dishes. Iris and several other girls devoured the food. Ah, this is the taste. It's amazing. Wow, this aged kimchi is insane. It tastes 89% like my grandmother's. Mei Wei looked up at Li Him, a triumphant smile on her face. Well then, Your Majesty, do you still doubt me? Li Him closed his eyes and let out a soft sigh. You were right. I was completely mistaken. He gazed at Mei Wei. I have something to say to you. Li Him's tone was solemn. You are the most remarkable person I have ever met. Mei Wei looked tense as she watched him. With his back turned to her, Li Him continued, You know how to distinguish my needs from my desires, and you possess the wisdom to fulfill both. That is why I understand even less. Someone as exceptional as you. Why do you want nothing more than the title of false fiancé? Li Him demanded. With your ability, forget being empress. You could swallow half the empire with ease. His eyes burned. Mei Wei, what is it that you truly want? Mei Wei's gaze remained calm. My master once said Li Him was a suspicious man. Someday, he would question my very existence. When that happened, he told me to answer like this. Mei Wei twisted the fabric of her skirt in both hands. You're right, I do have another motive. She raised her head and met Li Him's eyes directly. And that is, Mei Wei stepped forward, closing the distance. Her hand gently touched Li Him's cheek. Because I like you, Your Majesty. Her voice echoed through the empty room, soft yet unwavering. Li Him's pupils contracted sharply. His body went rigid at those words. Mei Wei stepped back from him and continued, As your loyal subject, I believe in you and follow in your footsteps. Li Him's throat bobbed. You. Mei Wei gave a sly little smile. Li Him looked away and said in a low voice, You're very good at being ambiguous. Mei Wei remained where she was, watching Li Him's retreating figure. He walked down the corridor, his footsteps echoing. He stopped without turning back, but the tips of his ears had turned unmistakably red. In a luxurious room, loud laughter rang out. A middle-aged woman with short reddish-brown hair was laughing so hard she bent over. She lightly tapped her cheek with her fan. Lihim, I haven't laughed this freely in ages. She arched a sharp brow. So what you're saying is, your fiancé is suspicious? Lihim remained silent, brows knitted tightly. The middle-aged woman continued. And your reason is that everything about her is simply too perfect? Lihim slowly lifted his eyes, his gaze sharp. I remember what you taught me when I was young. If someone appears and perfectly fills the voids in my life, I should first be wary of her. Rather than being moved, it would be wiser to suspect a trap. Yes, that is exactly what I taught you. The middle-aged woman laughed softly. Though the sight of you falling in love is rather adorable, I can't deny that young lady is indeed strange. She suddenly appeared one day, caught the emperor's attention with bold actions, and even knew things that only the late empress's confidants should have known. The woman's gaze grew distant as she murmured an ancient prophecy. Pull out the weeds, sow the seeds. Only a wise woman can unravel the secret of the red stone. A trace of approval passed through her eyes. Not only did she know Agnes's final words, she solved the problem in a strange way no one could have imagined. She recalled Mei Aiwei's figure, a girl followed by a crowd of children, waving and laughing in the sunlight like a carefully staged play. The woman propped her chin on her fingers, her gaze full of scrutiny. Such a capable young lady, and all she wants is to be a fake fiancé? That's too strange. Her fingers tapped the armrest lightly. I can think of two possibilities. First, she wants to capture your heart in order to achieve some other goal. The woman raised a second finger, smiling faintly. Second, she has already fallen for you. She looked toward Lihim. What do you think? Which one is Mei Aiwei? Lihim's lips moved. In the end, he did not say it. He fell into a long silence. The middle-aged woman leaned forward, intrigue glinting in her eyes. Then let's do this. She lowered her voice. Send that young lady one of Agnes's jewels, and make sure she clearly understands that it was your mother's real, personal possession. Lihim looked puzzled. The middle-aged woman continued. That means you must open your heart first, or at least appear to. She hid her smile behind her fan. It's the simplest way to see through someone's true feelings. Mei Aiwei's eyes widened, and her mouth fell open in surprise. Her hands trembled as she held an open red jewelry box. Inside it, a glittering pink gemstone necklace. Lihim turned his head slightly, looking a little flustered. What's wrong? Don't you like the design? I'll have a jeweler. No, that's not it. Mei Aiwei smiled and shook her head. Because, Your Majesty, what I want from you is something else. Lihim leaned forward. What is it? Mei Aiwei turned and rested against the back of the bench. Sunlight filled the courtyard. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The weather is wonderful, isn't it? Lihim's gaze moved beyond the window. Your Majesty. Mei Aiwei's eyes shone with anticipation. How about going on a spring outing with me? The scene shifted. A small boat drifted across a mirror-like lake, clear and still. The sky and clouds reflected in the water. Mei Aiwei let her fingers graze the surface, ripples spreading outward. I don't know. Lihim stared at Mei Aiwei's profile. Whether, as Aunt said, she was hiding a more dangerous purpose, or whether she truly. Lihim's brows drew together slightly. Is this what you want? Are you truly satisfied with this? Mei Aiwei turned toward him. Your Majesty? You mean this? She closed her eyes, her face radiant with a happy smile. Spending peaceful time with you is more precious than any treasure. Lihim suddenly stood up. Mei Aiwei's body tilted over the side of the boat and fell into the water with a huge splash. Mei Aiwei thrashed in the water, reaching out. Help me! She flailed desperately as the current swallowed her. Shouts rang out from the shore. Lady Mei! Gaeldake yelled as he jumped into the water. Lady Mei, I'll save you right away. Don't move. Stay still. A figure leapt through the air and rushed straight toward Mei Aiwei. Her face was full of terror. By the fireplace, the flames crackled. Gaeldake and Mei Aiwei sat wrapped in blankets, warming themselves. Mei Ai Wei lowered her eyes. My carefully prepared classic scenario failed like this, but it's fine. There's still plenty of activities left. For now, fireworks burst across the night sky. Plan number 2. Watching festival fireworks in the land of flames. The celebration grounds were packed with people. Mei Ai Wei was squeezed so hard by the crowd, she could barely breathe. What's going on? There are way too many people here. This was a secret spot for locals, but for transmigrated heroines like us, it was practically a tourist attraction. Someone slammed hard into Mei Ai Wei, and she lurched sideways. A hand immediately reached out from behind and held her shoulder steady. Mei Ai Wei looked up. Li Him, cloaked and hidden among the crowd, pulled her into his arms. She leaned against his solid chest. His low voice sounded by her ear. Be careful. Mei Ai Wei's cheeks flushed. Maybe this isn't so bad either. Gaeldake struggled to force a path through the crowd. Your Majesty, there are too many people. It will be difficult to escort you safely. For your protection, it would be best to return to the carriage. Li Him's voice came from beneath his cloak. Do that. He lowered his gaze to the Mei Ai Wei in his arms, his eyes unreadable. Mei Ai Wei trembled slightly. Gaeldake, did I do something wrong? Beneath Li Him's cloak, the corner of his mouth lifted. Now I finally understand. My adorable fiancée. Which side does her heart truly belong to? Mei Ai Wei's eyes gleamed. Let's go. Let's go. Mei Ai Wei had collapsed face down onto the dining table, completely limp. It's all over. Every activity I planned failed. Even the assassination failed. I ruined everything. Iris took small bites of dessert. You're too impatient. She added calmly. If you wait patiently, a good opportunity will always come. Mei Ai Wei turned her face to the side and lay there weakly. So side characters really are hopeless. No matter how hard I try, it's useless. Iris smiled faintly. Oh. Iris widened her eyes and quickly drank her tea. That's Li Him in disguise. And April too. Mei Ai Wei shot to her feet. I saw them too. How unfair. Her face turned bright red and tears spilled from her eyes. Activity 4. A man and a woman begin a secret date in a crowded dessert shop. Why does that kind of thing only happen to April? The next day, sunlight streamed through the window. Mei Ai Wei sat facing Li Him. Holding her teacup, Mei Ai Wei thought, I know. April is the heroine of the romantic comedy, and His Majesty is April's male lead. Romantic incidents are destined to bind the two of them together. But Mei Ai Wei's expression darkened as she fell into thought. Li Him lifted his teacup. You don't look well. Mei Ai Wei took a sip. I am troubled. And worried too. Li Him asked with concern. Are you all right? Mei Ai Wei waved both hands. And no, I'm just a little tired. Mei Ai Wei's tired face was reflected in the tea, the image wavering slightly. Li Him smiled gently. I'm glad you weren't hurt. Mei Ai Wei clasped her hands on the table. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Why did you go to that dessert shop? What did you talk about with April? But because we're not close enough yet. Li Him gazed at her. You say you're fine, but it doesn't look like things are going very smoothly. Mei Ai Wei's whole body went rigid, dark gloom practically rising off her. Was it because last time the outing got ruined? Li Him suddenly stood up. The carriage jolted, and his long hair swayed with it. Smiling, he said, this is a small token from me. I hope you won't feel too pressured. Li Him pushed a gift bag onto the table. Mei Ai Wei stared in surprise. It was beautifully wrapped and tied with a golden ribbon. This is... Mei Ai Wei recognized the bag. It was candy from the dessert shop in town. Li Him rested his chin on one hand. I mean the spring outing we took together. It still bothers me. Mei Ai Wei leaned forward. You chose it for me yourself? Li Him's lips curved upward. What fool would give someone else a gift meant for his lover? His smile was meaningful. The rhetorical question sounded like a belated confession. Li Him added, by the way, I ran into your sister at the dessert shop. She still knows nothing about her sister. My sister likes cinnamon flavor, not strawberry or chocolate. Mei Ai Wei laughed awkwardly. Haha, we're not that close yet. Li Him replied. I understand. Mei Ai Wei stared at the opening of the gift bag. So that day wasn't an event for April. It was for me. Li Him's eyes were gentle and unwavering. Mei Ai Wei's heart began to race, and her cheeks turned red. But it's too soon to be happy. Mei Ai Wei hugged the gift bag, looking confused. Li Him smiled and held out a hand. That was a bribe, not a proposal. The carriage rolled through the woods, birds singing clearly. Li Him rode a white horse. I invited you, but I don't want to force you. If hunting is inconvenient, then you could do something else. Mei Ai Wei, on a brown horse, hurriedly shook her head. And not at all. It's no trouble. She forced out a smile. It's event 5. While riding together, A man and woman fall in love. Mei Aiwei waved excitedly from horseback. I can't believe this happened naturally. Does this mean the world has finally acknowledged me as the heroine? Can I actually hope for it? Mei Aiwei cupped her face, cheeks burning. A romantic event with His Majesty. Li Him turned slightly in the saddle. Mei, now that we're away from the palace, let's talk. Mei Aiwei looked blank. What? Li Him's gaze was steady. About us. A jolt went through Mei Aiwei's heart. So suddenly? Is it really going to start like this? Sunlight filtered through the forest and fell across Li Him's profile. His eyes were deep. I've been thinking about this for a long time. Mei Aiwei blushed and pressed a hand to her chest. Li Him smiled faintly. When you think would be best to end our engagement? Mei Aiwei was struck dumb on horseback. Her mind went completely blank.